Welcome to Weird Web Radio, an explorer's guide to hidden worlds of the paranormal and occult, reality-expanding experiences, and the downright weird and bizarre. With your host, Lonnie Scott.
And we are recording. Once again, back is the incredible, rhyme-edible, guitar-playing, I got nothing to rhyme with that, Jason Miller.
How's it going?
Oh, man. Well, as our private conversation went, got some big ups and downs I'm dealing with right now, but otherwise I'm in a good, positive mindset and applying proper strategy and magic to find good solutions.
It's the roller coaster ride, baby.
That's right. How about you? What's going on? What's new?
Good. Busy summer. Summer always throws me off. The kids are home, and they've got camps and stuff like that. I mean, don't get me wrong; they're not just sitting around. But because I work from home, like the regularity of like they're off at school, I'm in work. It just gets thrown off. And it's not even all their fault because they'll know I'm at work and, they'll be like, oh, we're going to go do this thing. And I'm like, well, I want to do it. Like, I want to go, practice archery with you, so it's not even, it partly is just me. But yeah, so summer is coming to a close and I'm focusing back on work and here I am.
And here you are.
And just so everybody knows, like, I actually reached out to Lonnie for this one. I was like, hey, can you have me on? Because I need to get back in the game a little bit. And, I have something I need to talk about, and I'd love to talk about it with you. So Lonnie's doing me a favor having me on.
Hey, and you're doing the same, my friend. I mean, you know what's going on. It's private, folks, so I'm not sharing it with you, and you'll just have to accept that. But at a time when I was wondering if I even have an episode this month or not, Jason came through at a time when I thought, I just want to have a conversation with a friend that I can have a real comfortable conversation with. And that message popped up at just the right time in my life when I needed it. So, I mean, that is... when I talk about the magic of synchronicity, man, that is, in a nutshell, what I'm talking about.
Well, I'm glad I could be here. Thank you for having me.
Me too. Well, Weiser Publications has decided you're a classic. How's that feel?
I know, it's crazy. I've got the gray hair, and I am now a classic. I am a classic. One of them is like a bestseller, at least one. Maybe the others, I don't know. But
yeah.
So,
they've all real recent. They put out the new edition of Protection and Reversal Magic.
Yep. And
Sorcerer's Secrets, only this time under the name Real Sorcery.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're here to talk about my 8th grade homework.
Yes, we are.
How I had to read, comment on it. No, but it feels like that too when you're doing it. Like I would rather write 2 other books than go back and sort of review the books I've written 10 years ago and just be like, oh, what do I do here? Yeah, what do I do?
Did they approach you with this project, or did you decide you needed to go back?
No.
Do some revisions?
They approached me. So, when the publisher more or less owns the book when you write it and you have them publish it. Technically the rights to the book are mine, but they're the publisher. They can do what they want with it. Mm-hmm. And they reached out to me and said, we want to do these and we'd love for them to be expanded editions. And of course I'm like, yeah, of course, this is wonderful. Right. So, I'm signed a contract and, get the little paycheck and the deadline, which is really how you get me to do anything. And, so, and then I sit down to do it and I was just like, oh yeah, it's weird because on the one hand, people love both of these books. Right. Mm-hmm. And I love both of these books and so I go in and I'm like, well, I don't want to change too much, right? Because people loved it, and what was in there is how I thought at a certain point, and it speaks to how people think at a certain point. And, you know, so rather than kind of rip it apart and like put little inserts into the chapters and things like that, I opted for, you know, a new introduction, a couple appendixes, and then a commentary at the end of every chapter.
Mm-hmm.
So this way you get to see an author argue with himself. Like, this is 2006 and 2008 Jason arguing with 2023, 2022 Jason, you know, critiquing the old stuff. So it's not even a critique. It's not like that, but definitely updated thinking, right?
Yeah.
But you still get the old version to look through and be like, okay, you know, this is what he thought. This is what he thinks now. But you also get the idea that, you know, maybe he'll think something else when he's 70. And that's the reality of it, right?
Yep.
But now that I've done it, I really want to redo Financial Sorcery. So even though I was a total pain in the ass to Weiser and late with both the books and dragging my feet on it, I really want to redo Financial Sorcery too.
That would be a bad idea. I mean, the world of finance has changed.
Oh,
It's a very rapidly changing thing. I mean, crypto was you should have been there in the beginning, and now it's maybe you didn't get out soon enough. And, you know, yeah.
Yeah.
So, there's all that kind of thing going on.
Yeah.
So with Protection Reversal Magic, I think that was the first one that got released. At least that's the first one that got sent to me. Thank you, Weiser.
It is.
I appreciate you. Shout out to Gia over there.
Yeah. I'm seeing it on shelves. I was just at a Barnes & Noble in New Hampshire, and I saw it on the shelf. So,
yeah.
you know, that's always good.
When you were going through reviewing it, getting ready to do the commentary, like what was something that really stood out to you? Like, oh wow, you know, I better dig into that and see what I've got going new to say about it.
You know, Protection and Reversal Magic, I didn't feel needed as much updating as Real Sorcery did.
Yeah,
but I included. I'm real shy about exorcism.
interesting.
Not that exorcism isn't important; it's vitally important to Magic. But in the book, you know, I just kind of give, like, I'm not going to give you an exorcism ritual. I'm going to give you an overlay of how exorcism goes, because if you don't know what you're doing, this is a good way not just to hurt yourself, but to potentially victimize another person. And there's been a lot of that. If you dig into the news, there's so many like abuse cases and things like this. And my fear is always, and I've gotten people in classes, they're like, you know, well, I have these patients and I want to exorcise them and they're clearly possessed. And, you know, the person that's asking, I'm kind of like, yeah, you know, the last thing I want is this person tying somebody to a bed and, you know, God knows what they're going to do with the extra. So I get a little gun shy, but I went ahead and I included a Hecatean exorcism in the, just, you know, to complete it, because the exorcisms are vital to Magic, not just for protection and but they're really vital to understanding the grimoire tradition, because exorcism comes from orkizo, which means to bind by oath. And so people sometimes think a conjuration is the opposite of an exorcism. Like they get rid of something versus calling something. But that's not the case. An exorcism and an evocation are more or less the same thing if the conjuration demands that the spirits show up. Mm-hmm. You're binding a spirit by oath. Whether it leaves some place or someone or shows up in front of you is what you command it to do once it's bound by oath. But the process is actually remarkably similar. So I went ahead and I included a short Hecatean exorcism in Protection and Reversal Magic. And, the other thing, I think the big twist in Protection and Reversal Magic is the introduction. Because when I first wrote Protection and Reversal Magic in 2006, the Western occult community, this is the era of Witchvox, and so you gotta take a trip back. It's 2005, and people were not taking psychic attack very seriously at all. People were like, "Oh, if you think you're under psychic attack, you're delusional." Right? Like, people are you must be delusional. And so people that were maybe having real crossed conditions, even engaged in real, being cursed or something like that, were writing it off as like, well, no real witch or magician would ever curse someone, so I must not be under a curse and things like this. Meanwhile, the whole rest of the magical world is like, oh, yes, we would, absolutely. So I wrote it with this intent of like, take this aspect of magic seriously. So now it's almost 20 years later. And I think, I wrote the introduction and I said, I think I did my job too well. Because now what I see is people thinking that they are cursed or under cross conditions at the slightest bubble. My candle flickered. Why does the spirit hate me and want me dead? I did a spell to Hekate and I felt a chill in the air. Oh my God, someone please come and save my life, because why is Hekate trying to kill me?
Yeah.
And you see this kind of with the rise of the Facebook groups. You see this with the rise of the witch talk, which I try not to lambast because I don't pay attention to it. So everything I've heard about it is just third hand, but those that are in it are like, yeah, no, you're more or less correct. But, with the rise of this kind of feeding frenzy of like you might be under attack, you must be under attack. And this is drama, and we like drama. Drama is clicks. Drama is social media validation. Mm-hmm. And so I wrote the intro to this and be like, listen, pay attention to this book, because what it also says, apart from taking this seriously, is like, you need a constellation of symptoms before you think you're under attack. Mm-hmm. If you break a glass, it doesn't mean that you're under attack. If you try a new ritual or spell and you wake up with a fever, it doesn't mean that it was that ritual or spell, because if you're a witch or a magician, what are you doing all the time? Magic, right? Yeah. So at any given day, you can attribute whatever you're doing to magic because you're doing it every day, and into every life a little rain must fall. So it's sort of like, pay attention to this book, but really pay attention, because what this book is also giving you is the ways to know that you're not under psychic attack, and things to do in case you're, I might be, I might not be. Let's batten down the hatches for a little bit, see how it goes, right? Like the Dr. House approach to psychic medicine. He never tests for anything. He just treats. And then if you get better, all's good. So, absolutely, you can cleanse, but you don't need to go bananas and stuff like that. But so that's really the message of the new Protection and Reversal Magic. It's a way of me to say whatever my part was in like getting people worried about psychic attack. Like, good that you're taking it more seriously than just dismissing it. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that there aren't crazy people out there. It doesn't mean that there aren't people who just feed on psychic soap operas.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that 80% of the people who think they're under attack aren't under attack. But the 20% that are is a lot more than what people were validating in 2005, where basically, I mean, we were reaching a point where people practically didn't believe in magic at all.
I know. I remember that.
Yeah. I mean, my whole career is actually like started by arguing with Carl McColman, who was really like, all this spellcrafting stuff is taking away from the real religious value of paganism. I was like, hey. This is
right. You said that Sorcerer's Secrets, which became Real Sorcery, needed the updating the most. So what was it about that one that felt like it was out of touch a little bit, I guess?
Oh man, there are a few things. I think one of the biggest things in there would be in the love magic and influencing sections, right? There was, and I think this is the one thing that a chapter I really reworked. And, I'll just be blunt about it. I put in there, like, I commented on the way pickup artists, if you remember that whole thing, mystery and the game.
Neil Strauss and the game and all of that, yeah.
So, and I was like, I knew a few of these people. I was already married at this point, so not me.
Disclaimers.
Right. But yes. But I knew a few of these people, and many of them were doing real spiritual work, real mental work, reframing, trying to become better people in general, basically with the intent of getting laid.
Right.
And the thing is, I don't care about motivation. I do if it's victimization, which we'll get to in a minute. But the people that I knew were looking at that stuff, and they weren't really paying attention to the negging or the real kind of like predator and prey kind of mentality, which is, that's always kind of been there in we could get into the whole, baby, it's cold outside thing, but let's not. But the people that I knew were sort of like, okay, this is how I approach people without being a creep, right? Like, this is how I can start a conversation without standing there awkwardly, not knowing what to say. Mm-hmm. This is how I can be a little bold, not be a jerk, but to, be a little bold. And those are things that I thought were really good, right? And then, so I threw it in the book. And I was like, this is something you might want to look at. All that is gone, because what happened is that whole community did not highlight the things that I just talked about. Instead, it highlighted the negging and the manipulation, and there's nothing wrong with NLP itself, but the NLP for manipulative reasons. And then it became the whole victimization thing, and then it led into the incel movement, which is just straight up terror. And that's something that, if you have a chance to rewrite something and go back and be like, yeah, no. So those things are gone. And I went into the influence chapter as well and said, listen, there's times where you need to coercively influence people. Mm-hmm. You're in a court case. You're in a dispute. You're vying for an important account, right? Like, these are cases where you need to win and the other party needs to lose. and you don't necessarily have to get along afterwards, right?
Right.
So things that are more like direct influence like that are fine in those situations. But in the chapter sort of, updates, I was like, but listen, too many of you are looking at that and thinking, this is how I should be all the time.
Mm-hmm.
This is how I should treat my customers. This is how I should treat my partner. This is how I should treat my spouse. And that's not at all how you treat. I do zero influence magic on anyone that I am close to or anyone that I want to have a long-term positive relationship with.
Yeah, right.
From readers to students to friends to lover, to family, none. Absolutely no targeted influence. Because it does leave that bad taste in your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
It leaves that feeling. If anyone has ever been in a store where a hard sell happens, I know it doesn't happen as much anymore, but you're old enough, you remember,
I used to sell stuff.
Yeah, me too. Remember Nobody Beats the Wiz? I don't know if you had them down there, but electronics store like Crazy Eddie, and you go in and I mean, I worked there. I was trained as get their head spinning, and they walk out of there, and I'm just like, this is awful. This is an awful way to do business.
Right. They drill into your head. No is not no. It's a
right.
request for more information.
Right. And for anyone listening who is like, but how do I do that for business? Let me tell you something. All of these little, whether they're one-on-one or whether they're sort of scammy internet, like here's how you make a buck real quick. Let me tell you something. You can, in fact, manipulate people into buying something once.
Mm-hmm.
Cannot do it twice.
Right.
So if you are trying to, whether it's price manipulation or shady advertising, just don't do it if you were planning on being in business.
Right.
And so, there's a little bit of that. Real Sorcery, I expanded the 3 levels into the 7 that I mostly talk about now. So I explained that in there. I talked a little bit more about my evolving views on divination and, why I think about it differently than some sorcerers. And, And then I gave the full, in the original book, there were only 3 of the planetary seals that were completed at that point. And so at the end, I give the full 7 planetary seals for people to play with and thoughts behind each of them. And, Real Sorcery, I think, is a good update and solid for today's world. And,
Oh, I agree. I think it stands the test of time anyway. I agree. There are parts in there where I'm glad you saw that and made some changes. But yeah, as a new edition of it, I think it's fantastic. It's a solid, you want to get into magic, you want to do sorcery. Here, this book will get you from step 1 to competency in a very good fashion.
And let me also say about that the Love Magic rewrite, because somebody else was like, oh, somebody must have complained. No one throughout the whole book's existence, no one has complained to me. No one has canceled, complained, anything else. I'm sure eyebrows were raised here and there, and I think at Catland they were reviewing it, and she reached out to me and was like, this is a little iffy, but otherwise great book. So no, it's not the result of repercussions. It's the result of me looking at it and going like, oh God, this is now a serious issue that I didn't foresee back then. So, I just want to say that there. It's not a matter of like, playing it safe. It's a matter of like, saying what I really think now.
Right. Well, I mean, is there anything else about that book you want to highlight? Because, we're going to move into a portion of the show that is really dedicated to fans of yours and fans of mine. And we put out the call all across certain groups on social media and, of course, to my Patreon members to say, hey, if you wanted this chance to ask Jason a question, now you're going to get it. So we're going to go into that portion next. But if there's something else you really want to cover about that book first, we can definitely hit on that.
I can't really, nothing is jumping out at me as like, I should highlight this. But, what I will say is that, this book was meant as like to be people's first book on Magick or amongst their first books on Magick, right? And a way to put it into context for people. So maybe they have a spell book. Maybe they already have, another book. But this book is kind of meant to support all that and to give a strategy so that, if you're running around with great, really good books on Magick, but they don't talk about how it's applied, right? They just give the magic. This book is really designed, it was then, and it is even more so now, to give, like, this is how you apply this to stuff that matters so that it actually makes a big difference in your life. Because, I mean, not to toot my own horn, but I'm good at Magick. I get results most of the time when I do Magick. Have since I was 15 years old. But I spent the first 20 years of my career doing spells, getting good results, but not really aiming it at things that mattered. You know what I mean? Like, I'm aiming it at things that fix something. They fix a problem, or they create an interesting situation, or they create a short-term conducive circumstance. This is really meant to be like, here's how you do things at different stages too. That's probably the biggest add-on here to the financial section, which I didn't even write about in Financial Sorcery. The idea of the 4 stages of stuck, solvent, solid, and sovereign, and why your aim has to be different at each stage, right? Like, if you're stuck, you don't have enough income to cover your expenses, right? Whether you have a job that doesn't pay enough, or you don't have a job, or whatever it is. So your goal then is just, you've got to increase income. You can't, but there are a lot of people out there that are like, oh, I'll cut expenses. Cut what?
Right?
Like, your avocado toast isn't going to make a difference.
Nope.
Go ahead and eat it. Like, make life bearable for yourself. Make more money. That's your only goal at this point. You get solvent where you have just enough, right? And people can be solvent at any income level. It comes in, it goes out. It comes in, it goes out. They build nothing. VH1 specials. Rich people who lose it all, like, they've never been more than solvent. So for those people, there it is about cutting back. There it is about, now I need financial discipline, right? Like, I've got that money-making thing coming in, but now I need the discipline to manage it. Then solid is about building something. That's where your expansion comes in. That's where you really need to worry about your money making money and things like that. And so the magic you're doing at each stage is completely different. And if you don't know that, like, if you're stuck and you're reading these books that are more about financial discipline, or you're reading books that are more about investing, you're on the wrong page, right? Like, you're investing in things that are not going to give you a return that is as big as your credit card interest rate. So you're losing money.
Right.
Like, and these are the kinds of things, since we're doing magic to influence reality, you have to know where you are in reality. Mm-hmm. So that's really what real sorcery is all about. Magic is a real thing, but people who say that it's real and know that it's real, all the time, they don't treat it like a real thing. Mm-hmm. They treat it like a fake thing. If the magic doesn't work, it must be because the gods didn't have that in plan for me, or, you know, it's working on the astral but not in the physical. No, it didn't work for the same reason that I can't push a Toyota Tundra uphill. Like, it's mechanics. It's a mechanical failure. It's a mechanical result, or you don't have a clear path from A to Z. People, once you say magic is real, sorcery is real, thus Real Sorcery is the title of the book, very few people then look at it as a real thing that works more or less how other real things work.
Yeah.
But that's what we need to do, in my humble opinion.
I agree. And I would like to add my thought about this book in general. It is not tradition specific. If you're any kind of witch, any kind of pagan, druid, occultist, ceremonial magician, sorcerer, you name it, whatever you are out there listening, this book will, I promise you, impact your life in great ways that you can't and you don't necessarily find in what you're already doing. I primarily spiritually identify as a heathen, and when I found the first edition of this book of Sorcerer's Secrets many years ago, it transformed how not only I practice magic, but it changed how I find magic and what I do. So do yourself a favor and get out there and get it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And thank you. All right, let's do the fan portion.
Let's do the fan portion.
Let's do the yeah, why not?
Fan service, as they call it. Right?
Yeah, this is where I wanted to, like, more of that. Let's have a good, comfortable, fun conversation. Before we get into it, I just want to remind people, if you're a fan of this show and you enjoy the content you're getting, there are many, 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 many more hours available to you of each guest in the Patreon portion of the show. And for $5 a month, I set it at a price that would be like you and I sitting at the bar or going to Starbucks, and you said, hey, man, let me get your drink for you today. Just one time, you get all that extra added benefit. And you can go get that at patreon.com/weirdwebradio, or go to weirdwebradio.com, click join the membership. It would be enormously helpful to me in what I'm facing right now. And I'm not asking for donations. I'm asking for you to come be part of something awesome and get a big benefit out of it. And that way you'll also be helping me. Now, let's move on. Patreon first. Because, you know, they paid.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Elizabeth, when I announced that you were coming back on the show to the membership, well, first of all, Amy says, yay, Jason. So that's cool.
Yay.
Yeah. Elizabeth says, awesome. Jason is such a great guest. You two have an infectious rapport. The friendship shows. It was an earlier episode with Jason that inspired her to take your Sorcery of Hekate class last year. So thank you to both of us for that. Hey, no problem, Elizabeth. Thank you. The question, I like this. As a fellow Gen Xer, is it obvious we're from Generation X?
Oh, yeah.
My birthday is within a year of Jason's, and I'm curious to know what, if any, impact moving into middle age may have had on your practice. It could be anything as straightforward as adjusting rituals or movements to accommodate for creaky joints. but also curious about changes with things like your energy, your focus, goals, etc. All right. That sounds like a book.
It's huge. It is.
Yeah.
It has been a huge thing. It's kind of like what I was saying about the different stages too,
Mhm.
right? You know, I was typical slacker Gen X in my 20s. You
Oh
know,
man, me
just
too.
anti-establishment, didn't really think about, like, you know, money was for materialists, not for spiritual
That's
people.
right.
You know, it doesn't, I'll sleep on couches, it doesn't matter. And you know, you get into your 30s and it's sort of like, oh, okay, I'm not dead yet, and I might not be. Oh, yeah, I gotta figure something out. And then kids come along, and it's really like, I gotta figure something out now. So, really, in a way, my whole career, the whole idea of strategic sorcery comes from the shift from, you know, the bohemian 20 something, you know, finding my place in the world into making something out of my place in the world. That shift that I hate to say a few people don't ever make. And it's fine if they're happy, but most people that I've seen not make that shift aren't. And
Yeah.
that's me being an old judgmental bastard, but it's true. It's my findings. So, you know, it becomes less about what makes you happy and more about what makes you fulfilled, right? Like a career, kids, hard work, building a business, whatever it is. These things don't make you happy day in and day out. They don't. And I think there were like stupid studies on this, like a leather jacket makes you happier than children. Like, yeah, no shit. But it doesn't make you fulfilled in
Right.
the long run, right? It's not a day to day. I hate writing books, but I love having written books. So it's a different mindset. And so that was in my 30s. And throughout my 40s, I spent that building the life that I had envisioned, that I literally wrote down a Jupiterian pact for, and fulfilling it, checking it off boxes, click, click, click. And now I'm 50. So I am 50 years old this year. And the shift now is, in fact, dealing a little bit with some of the aches and pains. Here's a great example. I teach a class called the Black School, and a big part of it is writing this book, like writing in a book your spells and rituals, and in a particular order even, right? Like you have to do, like the book itself is a magical tool. I can't do it anymore. I have arthritis in my right thumb. Writing more than a couple sentences is excruciatingly painful. So it is, and there's not much they can do until we get to, you know, like surgery, which, you know, I'm a little gun shy about at this point. So yeah, you know, little aches and pains here and there. I can sit for hours and hours and hours in Siddhasana. I have, you know, all my life. My feet are actually, my whole right leg is double jointed. Some people have seen the video of me going from standing into full lotus in one swoop, because I can turn my right leg all the way around. However, now that I'm 50, that also means hip pain.
Yeah.
So as I sit all day in you know, Siddhasana, half lotus, I'm actually pulling those tendons that need not to be pulled anymore. So there's all kinds of little things. But thankfully, Magick doesn't really depend on any of that. It's all just different habits that you learn to cope with and roll with. And, as Gen Xers, specifically, since this is geared towards Gen X, the reason for the X is the lack of definition, the lack of pigeonholing, the disappearing factor, right? Not as big as the baby boomer, not expected to be as big as the millennials, and we aren't. We were raised by people that, it was the first generation where both our parents had to work. So we would come home from school and just be on our own. I was talking with a friend the other day. I said, I don't know any Gen Xer that doesn't have some childhood story of having to run for their life from someone because, they were trying to be kidnapped or assaulted or, just messed with or they walked on somebody's lawn. And, I remember I missed a school bus one day and I ran across a field to catch it as it went around the block. And this guy shot at me with, probably with rock salt, but still, probably in the air, but, it was, we learned the hard way and, just keep learning the hard way, expect change. It's the only constant. And don't get too settled in habits, because those habits might need to change, especially as you get older, And that's magical and otherwise.
Yes, it sure is. I will say, for folks dealing with any kind of pain, please consult your doctors and things. Don't try to mask it, but a very useful thing out of hypnosis that I found very successful over the years. One particular visualization with people was imagining just a radio dial, like a car radio, the old school kind, had two knobs on it, and you've got a dial for comfort and you've got a dial for pain. And you just want to kind of adjust the signal to comfort being more clear and pain being much less in your face. So play with that. Go into meditation and see how that works out for you out there, folks.
Absolutely.
Next up, I guess you're pronouncing this as Nyctophile. Says, I love Jason. Yeah, thank you. Question. I wonder if his theory on how magic and the divine work has changed with time. Okay, wondering if your theory on how magic and the divine work has changed over time, especially due to your extensive work with Hekate and Saint Cyprian. And then goes on to say, I know no one really knows what the fuck is going on in this world, but what does he think? There's more. And he says also, would he say that his work on the Sorcery of Hekate approaches the goddess in a more mystical aspect, almost theurgic? I'll say on the Sorcery of Hekate thing, Jason and I have discussed that course in depth on previous appearances on the show, so go check that. Go check those out. Other than that, let's tackle this your theory on how magic and the divine work over time. Has that changed?
It has. And one of the big things, so I did a class that you can purchase at the Arcane Audio shop on my webpage, but it's called The Mechanics of Magic. And it's how roughly I think magic works. But there is the very first, before I even get into the mechanics, I talk about the head, the heart, and the hand. And so a lot of the theories of things that involve the facts, right? Are Thoth and Hermes the same? Are they different? When they're invoked together, is there a crossover? Is there a third deity? How does this work? Is Jupiter this, so all of these things, these sort of attempts to nail down the facts, I've come to the conclusion that magic and philosophy and religion suck at this.
Yeah.
They are bad at it.
Yeah.
They are bad at it. But that's okay, because facts are not the only type of truth.
Mm-hmm.
There is also meaning, right? And I think that it excels at this. Yeah. Magic, philosophy, religion. Take magic out. Let's just look at philosophy, right? Aristotle, Plato. We can look at things that they said in a sense of meaning that still hold true to this day. Aristotle's idea of friendship as basically yourself extended, and different ideas of inquiry and how it should be done. There are profound truths here. Everything they said about facts, unless it had to do with math, was wrong. And the problem is when we attribute a certain amount of prestige to someone, we don't want to say that they're wrong about facts. So for over 1,000 years, no one was allowed to suggest that the earth revolved around the sun, because that's not what Aristotle said. So, this is... So a lot of the theories about, well, what do you think is the truth? What do you think are the facts? These are what I call head questions. And I've just stopped. I'm like, I don't care. Because so many of these beings, especially spiritual beings, divinities, they are by definition more subtle and vast than human beings are. Right? I think most people can agree on this.
Mm-hmm.
When you really think about how subtle and different and complex people are, and how these easy answers really don't even fit for people,
mm-hmm.
you have to look at these beings and say, there are multiple paths. I'm looking right now at a statue of Saint Sarah La Kali, right? The famous... is she the priestess of Isis that met the three Marys on the shores of France when they sailed there? Is she the Egyptian handmaiden of one of the Marys? Is she the daughter of Mary Magdalene and Christ, and is black because of the mystery aspect, like other black Madonnas? All three of those have meaning and thus hold truth.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think any one of them is factual. I would be surprised if they were, but I'm open to it. But I don't, as a magician, I don't have to worry about it anymore, because I just stopped. Stop with the stupid factual theories that can't be verified. And that's the thing. Facts need to be verified. It's the baseline of a fact, right? It just needs to be able to be verified. These things can't be verified, so why are we obsessing over, the physics of them unless it has meaning and usefulness? That's the other thing. So the head, the heart, the hand. What things are in a factual, concrete way. The heart, what things mean and feel. And the hand, how they are useful. Magic is great at the last two and terrible at the first one. So a lot of my theories, they're still there, but I don't worry too much about them anymore. Yeah.
Since philosophy was brought up, I really want to point this out to listeners. A friend of mine in the Troth, name is Josh Heath, and goes by Heathen Philosopher on YouTube and TikTok, and asks really poignant questions about philosophy and asks you to think. In fact, he starts every video with "Let's think, folks." So, if you're into those deeper thinking, and get into the deeper meaning in questions like this, please do go check out Josh's stuff. I just want to give him a little shout out since philosophy came up.
Yeah.
Now we're moving on to your group, sir, the Strategic Sorcery group, for those of us who have taken your Strategic Sorcery course.
All right.
Looks like somebody had a question. I'm not sure I'm going to say your name right either. It is Ishtarfall, one of those. I apologize if I'm not doing that right. Let's see here. There's quite a lot. See if I can boil this down to what the question is. Saying like you've made a number of posts about processing post-gnosis experiences, and curious about a step-by-step guide on how to form a concrete body of information from spirit communication. Well, you wrote a book about this.
I did.
Consortium of Spirits.
I did.
Yeah.
And even then, that book just came out last year, but I have updated thoughts on that. So,
yeah. Okay.
So let me go ahead and answer.
Okay.
I get asked all the time, how do we tell if a spirit is lying or not? How do we tell if the information is good, right? And I think that speaks to the question here, right?
Yeah, and they go on and talk about manifestations and stuff like that too, which I think is a pretty common question.
Yeah.
When it comes to spirit communication, how do you get them to manifest? How do you know if they're there? That kind of thing.
Yeah. So we can break that out in a minute, but in the book Consorting with Spirits, I talk about perception and projection and how every interaction you've ever had is part accurate perception of what was said and part projection of your own mind. That, like this conversation that we're having, each of us are experiencing it through that lens.
Mm-hmm.
And again, spirits, being more subtle, are more prone to projections, our own projections getting overlaid on there. And so there are different ways to kind of boost the quality is really it. Meditation, really, so that you can discern the workings of your own mind. Asking for other kinds of confirmation. So a non-magical, non-visionary confirmation. In other words, like my example of a spirit telling me you've got to summon these demons the next day, and me saying, well, I don't have anything to summon them with, and the spirit saying, I'll give you something, and a friend showing up with a wasp staff as a gift for me, like that night, was sort of like, okay, there's no mistaking. And it doesn't always happen like that, obviously. So, but the update that I want to tell people, how I really think about it, is even more so, I don't think too much about it. I think about what is actionable and what is useful, right? Does this have meaning? And is there something for me to do? If there isn't something that I'm going to reframe how I think about things, meaning, or something that I have to do and follow up on, it doesn't matter. Real, not real, me, a spirit, who cares? It's the equivalent of a thumbs up, or like if so it's not all that important. If it does have something that you're going to reframe how you think about things or actions that you're going to take, how do we treat this when it comes from other people? How do you evaluate that question? So people are really bent on this idea of like, well, I need a test to make sure that spirit isn't lying. right? Like I need the exorcism to force it to tell the truth. And I need to do this to make sure it's telling the truth. Some of them are good. Some of them are bad. Some of them are, not so great. I heard from Jack Grail that a friend of his, who's a Macumba priestess, was telling people you want to kind of reverse what the spirit just told you. And if it's from the spirit, you'll get kind of a feeling of nausea from it, right? Like that's not what I said. And I think that's good. I think that's solid. Anyone that wants to try that, it's easy enough to try. But I always say that the worst position to be in with a liar is thinking that they can't lie. Right?
Yeah.
So, imagine like you've got Asmodeus or something in the triangle, and it's going to tell you to put all your money into Bitcoin, the day before a crash. And you're like, but you can't lie to me because I conjured you and asked, Asmodeus is like, yeah, sure. I definitely, I can't lie to you. You've bound me. Look at me. I'm tied up. I can't do anything. Meanwhile, it's like the self-release handcuffs that you got at the boardwalk. Right. So, it's like, they just are like, hey, I just evaluate information the same way I do with people because we don't have that ability with people, right? And we get along for the most part okay. Right? Like some of us get conned sometimes, but most people aren't con artists and most spirits aren't ill-intentioned either. Right. So just roll with it. And if it's actionable and it's a good idea, did it come from Hekate or did it come from you or some combination of the two? It's less important if it's a good idea. So I kind of have been throwing the whole dynamic under the microscope and reworking it and how I think of it. So that's the answer. And then how to get them to manifest. There are different ways where you definitely want to pull for quality of communication. But at the same time, I think that the people that like everything, there are people on the extremes. You've got the people that are like, okay, I did this prayer and now I have a brain fart. So that is obviously Hekate speaking to me and I should take that to the bank because that is definitely 100% her. Mm-hmm. And then on the other hand, you've got people that are like, well, the spirit's there. I can feel a spirit's presence. I'm getting clear ideas, but I can't see it fully with my physical eyes. So we're just going to keep yelling at it and throwing names of God at it until it fully manifests. And if it doesn't, then it's a failure, right? Like both of those are no good. Mm-hmm. On the one hand, you've got people that are just, they're just doing the fantasy thing, like the slightest little glimmer, and they're off in fantasy land, and they think that whatever they got is directly from the goddess or the god or the spirit. On the other hand, you've got people where it's like the spirit's there, it's communicating, you just won't listen. And you're like, I need to see you. I need this. I need, and they won't reach out on their part. They want 100% the spirit coming to where they are, but they won't quiet their mind. I mean, sometimes they won't even stop conjuring long enough to listen. It's like, I'll do a 20-minute long conjuration. Stop. Is there a spirit there? Nope. 20-minute long conjuration. The spirit's like, well, give me a second. Let me talk. Oh my God. Right. I'm trying to, articulate something from another fucking dimension. Let me, give me a second. It's buffering. Just stop. Maybe you could hear me if you stopped screaming, names of God at me. So yeah, like finding a happy medium is the trick.
Nice. I'm loving the way you're answering some of these things too, because it reminds me so much of your book that I don't think gets near enough attention. Elements of Spellcasting. That fucking thing is awesome, and it's got all that kind of snark into it.
I think it's great too, and I don't know if that'll ever get an updated one. It people that loved it, and then it just kind of disappeared. And
Yeah. Well,
but yeah, that was one of those books. I mean, I wrote it for me and me and my friend Matt Brownlee, who did all the cartoons in there. We like every time I open it up, I just think about us hanging out at a bar in Philadelphia called the Pope, in South Philly, just coming up with all the ideas for the cartoons and laughing our asses off. And just some of the good times that we've had doing Magic together, and so
that's awesome.
It really, like, Elements of Spellcrafting, apart from the fact that everything in there is something that I think people need to hear that they aren't hearing, or at least weren't at the time it was written. It really is. I think maybe the name is misleading, because it's not really about spell crafting. It's about how to do magic effectively.
Yep.
But, it is what it is.
Yeah, it's a great book. I highly, highly, highly recommend it to anyone out there listening. You want that one, I promise.
If it gets redone, maybe Weiser will rename it as they did.
Yeah, I'm sure
Real
they will.
Sorcery.
Yeah, just don't give it another black cover. Come on now, stop doing that to all the classics.
Yeah, I love. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love the artist, especially the. I love the artist. It's the same guy that Cambion Art that did the cover of Consorting with Spirits, which I think is my favorite cover of any of my books.
It is really cool.
But yeah, both of these are very black cover.
Yeah.
They look very left-hand pathy kind of, which is not really my bag, but
nope.
Is what it is.
Yep. All right. I had a question out of my Weird Web Radio Facebook group, and this comes from Jen. Jen says, this is going to be an easy answer. Is there applicable urban sorcery stuff here? It says, I'm kind of the opposite of nature oriented, and I'd love to have more urban risk hedging magic in my arsenal. Big yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's plenty. I can't really think of anything that requires you to live in the country. And
nope.
When I wrote it, I was living in the suburbs, but I have lived in the city. So yeah, I think all of it is urban friendly. But what I will say is that there is nothing in nature that is not of nature. There is no non-natural landscape. Yes, there's what mankind has done, right? But I can't think of a city I've ever been to that didn't have places of power that I would gather dirt from, and places that have profound art with spiritual significance. I just saw, I think, I could be wrong, but I think I saw Don Webb post a photo of a bunch of like Temple of Set folks in front of the Gates of Hell in Philadelphia at the Rubin Museum. No, it wasn't. It was my friend Eric. But I used to, when he sent it to me, I was like, man, I used to do stuff there. So a cityscape is a wonderful place to do environmental magic in. Very often the parks are chosen in ways that they line up interestingly, and they're, whether it's there before they were chosen or developed after they were chosen, sort of lines that can be drawn between the cities, between the parks in a city, become interesting. There's a lot you can do with the natural landscape of a city.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And to Jen's point, you pick up Real Sorcery, Protection, Reversal Magic, Elements of Spellcrafting, Sex, Sorcery, and Spirits. I mean, I've got the collected works of Jason Miller. And I'm telling you, none of it requires you to be out in nature. So you're in good hands here. Please do go get it. In the 6 Ways and Related group that I help run after Aiden has taken his very long hiatus away from social media and such, somebody asked me to ask you about your Wisdom of Hekate course you've got in the works. Now, I don't think I've heard you say anything about this. Is that a thing?
It's a nesting baby. It's coming about. So,
all right.
This will be open, I think, to anyone who's completed Sorcery of Hekate, the first class.
Okay.
And it is, whereas Hekate 2 and Hekate 3, they continue the Sorcery of Hekate, and there's plenty of both magic and mysticism. The Wisdom of Hekate is going to focus on the going beyond, the self-transformation, the mystical work. And it's going to be taught differently. So people that take that course, you won't need to be in a certain place at a certain time, because I don't want to deal with that. But it is going to require you to listen to the lessons in a place that you can work along with the lesson. So there will be some guided, I don't want to say guided meditations or exercises, but there will be instructions that will be like a guided working. The difference is they're for training, right?
Yeah.
Like you're expected to learn it along with this or do it along with this and then drop the recording. That's one of the things I have not done a lot of like guided meditations and that kind of thing, because ultimately I'm not a big fan of meditation apps and things like that. It's not that they're not good for training.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that they don't sell themselves that way. They sell themselves as like, when you need to meditate, take out the Headspace app.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, no, your meditation should be you and your mind, not you and an app in your mind. Just like, honestly, even in a traditional, a Buddhist or a Hindu with a teacher, it's you and the teacher in your mind until you get it. And then it's you in your mind practicing what the teacher told you.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with this digital world, it's now like, I'm always there. I'm always in this thing. And the problem with that is it becomes, as much as it's a help at the start, it becomes a barrier after a certain period, because, it's like training wheels on a bike. It'll help you learn how to ride a bike. But once you can balance, those training wheels need to come off, or you will not be able to ride a bike properly with like you can't properly ride a bike with training wheels. It's an obstacle. So, but yeah, it's exciting. I'm working on it slowly. It's for 2024, and maybe even the later half of 2024, because everything I do, I take my time, I test it out, I make sure that, it works, that there's not too much of my own projections in there, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Okay. I've got some emails, a couple of them that came in. The first one I opened up here is from Joanne. It concerns Lesson 5 in the Sorcery of Hekate course and something you said about the gray. Do you want to cover that here, or would you rather me just email Joanne back and tell her to cover that with you privately or in one of the Sorcery of Hekate groups?
Specific, let's leave it for.
Yeah, it is definitely course specific.
Yeah, no, that should be in the Q&A of a course, or you can send it over to me.
All right, sorry, Joanne, but this is definitely one of those Q&A moments for the courses, and shoot that over to Jason if you would in whatever group you happen to be in, and I'm sure he'll get to it. All right, but thank you for submitting a question. That was appreciated. Next up is a story from, what is it with names I can't pronounce today? Getty Minas, Gediminas. I don't know how to say it properly, and I apologize. So they saw my post in the 6 Ways group and love all the previous interviews with Jason Miller on Weird Web Radio. Thank you very much. The question is, storing magical items that you wouldn't normally want to keep in your home and precautions around it. To give an example, they said yesterday they had some hot foot powder based on Jason's advice in your magical protection book. The powder had been charged by the allies, prayed over heavily, seemed to be doing its job well. Police have already visited the problematic neighbors yesterday. There's a story there. However, one of their magical friends came to their room to check if they felt anything out of the ordinary and immediately sensed that they felt something physically horrible in the corner where the powder is being stored, sealed in a jar. No one knew it was stored there. And as they were discussing the whole procedure of the hot footing, they were advised to at least seal the jar with wax, stamp it with a sigil so it wouldn't spread its energy around the house. They're curious about your thoughts on this kind of situation.
Yeah, if it's something that it's like that, that powerful mojo. I do have a wooden chest where I keep things like that in there, and so really 2 things. I have a sort of a big, like a safe where I keep what I consider cursed objects. If you remember, it's like Louis Vendredi's basement. If you've ever seen Friday the 13th, the series, which,
yeah,
they go after cursed objects and then they put them in this sealed thing. So I have something, and that's not in the house actually. That is out in an outer building. But then items that I use, but which are, excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. Look,
I hope you live, man. Stay alive.
No, I'm good. So things like that, if it's something that seems to just be emanating that, I do have a box where I keep those things. And an image or a symbol of the deity or a protection that you want to put on it. Hecate's wheel, for instance, from Protection Reversal Magic on the box, consecrate the box to keep energy like that in. That would be fine. Mm-hmm. Certainly ingredients that are more for darker magic kind of stuff that, if you have and you're keeping it on hand, have something like that.
All right. Last one out of the fan questions comes from Sophia. Sophia has a couple of questions here. Are computers magically compatible with mirrors? And can computers be used to merge 2 forms of magic? So we're getting at a technology and magical kind of thing here.
I don't know what she means by merging two forms of magic.
I'm not sure what that means either, unless it's just speaking directly towards technology and magic being blended here.
Here's what I'm going to say. There are a group of, not a group, there is a thinking out there that there's almost like there's a digital world and a real world. And we talk about online life and offline life. And we talk about going places online, right?
Right.
But
true.
But we don't go anywhere online, right? So like there are in one of my spells where I have people walk to, take a kind of pilgrimage to different spots. Somebody was like, well, what if I do this, but go to these different web pages instead of these places in my life, like the grocery store webpage and the church. And I'm like, you're not going anywhere. You're sitting at your computer. And so the thing is, can technology be used for magic? Yes, it can. Yeah. But it's not a separate kind of magic. It's just magic.
Yep.
Computers are nothing but collections of on-off switches. Like that's it. Your transistor, how many transistors can you fit on a chip? Transistors are things that turn on and off. That gives us our ones and zeros. Our assembly languages collect the ones and zeros and then build a basic language that other languages are then built on, from which we get the graphical interfaces of our video games and our web pages and our VR and things like this. Can you do magic with those? Yes, you can. But it's not a different kind of magic, and you need to understand what it is you're doing in a physical sense. Mm-hmm. So if you are on VR or you're on a web page and you light candles on a web page, right? You're not lighting candles. You are doing sigil magic, really. Mm-hmm. You're still doing sympathetic magic. You're manipulating images for magical purposes, and that's fine, right? If you are like I've talked before about when I want, like if I have something that I'm marketing and it's not selling really well, I will go into my PayPal, which I usually transfer like once a week to a regular bank account, and I'll transfer everything in there out with the specific, like I'll pray ahead of time. I will take the sympathetic magic action of moving that money out to create a vacuum that sucks, money in, and it works every time. But it's not techno magic. It's not chaos magic. It's sympathetic magic. It is not different than sympathetic magic where someone creates a flame in a bottle to suck a spirit into, or anything else. It's sympathetic magic. Mm-hmm. So there is no cyberverse. There is no metaverse. It's just you sitting in your room. When we talk with people that we're not live with, it's not the same. Mm-hmm. And I know that people don't want to hear this because we're all living more and more of our lives through the digital medium. But it is not the same. It is not hitting your brain in the same way. And it's different. It's no different. Somebody the other day asked in one of my classes about LED candles. Can I use LED candles? Some people were like, yeah, it's the same as a regular candle. Other people were like, no, you must never use LED candles. My answer is, it depends, but it's not a candle. Look at what it is, though. just because it's not a candle doesn't mean it can't be used in Magic. It's a lamp. It doesn't give off heat, but it does give off light. So if your magic requires heat or the burning of an oil to release the herbs, then no, that's not something you can do with a lamp. However, you could put sigils around the outside of it and change the LED color to match the planet that you're working with and get something really cool that way. You can also leave it on for days and weeks at a time without worrying about burning your house down.
Yeah, right.
So there's a long-term potential. So rather than like, is this the same as, or can I do magic with, just, it's a real thing. Magic is real. You can do magic with anything that's real, and everything is real, but look at what it is, not pretend that it's something else. Like once you start pretend play, you're out of magic being real. You're into cosplay. And that's fine, and it's fun. And even that has its magical uses, but you know, it's like that. So yeah, you can do magic online, but understand how it works and why it works through that medium, and that it's all part of the regular world. So there's no merging of techno magic and regular magic. It's just magic.
I totally dig that answer. All right. I think this is a good place to come to an end of the regular portion. We are currently live and well in August of 2023. I think I know you've been talking about another Black School course opening soon. Is that correct?
No, well, yeah. So, early September, I think it's the 12th. So coming up quickly. September 12th. The next Black School cycle is opening. Okay. And yeah, the courses continue on. So yeah.
All right.
And then some things on my webpage are always available. You can always join Strategic Sorcery. You can always join Level Up. You can always pay and download the Arcane audios. I don't even remember how many of them there are now. There's like 23 or so of them. So that's a lot of info.
And sign up for the newsletter. You will get great content, and you will be notified of all courses when they're coming open again on their cycles.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely.
Yep. And that is all at. And
don't forget, buy the new Real Sorcery, which was Sorcerer's Secrets. It's better now.
It's better now. That should be the subtitle. Real Sorcery. It's better now.
It's better. It was good before. It's better now.
I can't believe that's not sorcery. No. All right. Yeah. Check out all of Jason's stuff. Like he said, strategicsorcery.net. And now we're going to take this conversation over to Patreon. Before we do, I want to thank all of you for listening. Jason, as always, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends around your network. Tell people to come check it out. Thank you to everyone who submitted some questions. That was a lot of fun. It helped make everything a little more comfortable this month with some challenges I'm dealing with. So I've nothing but love and appreciation to all of you as well. You want to hear the rest of this conversation? We are going to talk a little bit about divination. And that's what this particular Patreon portion will be about. So you want to hear that, you're going to have to go to patreon.com/weirdwebradio. Or go to weirdwebradio.com and click join the membership to get access to not only this bonus portion, but I mean a lot of hours of bonus audio that is out there for your enjoyment. So thank you for listening and stay weird, my friends. All right. It is that bonus audio time.
All right.
All right. And we are in bonus audio time. Now, typically, as the audio, if you were listening to the end of it, says, would you like to hear how the guest answered that question? What famous person's resting place would you most like to visit? We've asked Jason that a few times. So I'm more interested in saying something to start this off. Is there a famous, like a particular famous person's spirit, famous human dead spirit that you have successfully interacted with in some way?
Oh, goodness.
Do you want to hear how they just answered that question? What famous person's resting place would you most like to visit? That and many others, including what they think about the afterlife, what they may or may not do in cemeteries, what are their traditions, magical practices that have to do with the dead, folklore that surrounds their homes, and so much more, available for only $5. $5 a month. Even if I make more than one episode in a month, it's still just $5 a month at patreon.com/weirdwebradio, or go to weirdwebradio.com and click join the membership. You can find me on Instagram at weirdwebradio. You can find me on Facebook as Weird Web Radio, or come join the new, fun and exciting Weird Web Radio Facebook group. Thank you again for being here. Stay weird out there, my friends.